is Father Peter Chilella, pastor of Blessed Sacrament Church in Burford, and I'm happy to share with you some of these thoughts for your Faith Day gathering and preparation for your new school year. As we look forward to the reopening of our schools, I'm sure many of you, like our parents and colleagues and students, are facing the uncertainty of the unknown. How will we cope? Are we ready? Will there be a second wave? These were the same questions that myself and the parishioners had to face back in June when we were given the green light to reopen. Believe me, there was a part of me that said, I just wish we had more time. But we did it. We learned to be resilient, to be adaptable, to be mutually supportive, and above all, to place our hope in God's loving grace. In the face of such great challenges, there is always the temptation to give in to despair. Thomas Merton, the great spiritual writer of the past century, once wrote, "There is fruitfulness and a possibility of new life in the very threat of despair. It forces us to choose, and we will always have the strength to choose life unless we give in to despair." Merton also reminds us about belief in a God who will never abandon us. And the only way that we can strengthen that belief is through surrender, genuinely surrendering ourselves in God, trusting Him, letting go, and allowing divine providence to guide our thoughts and our actions. This sense of surrender and trust in providence became ever so clear to me back in June, not just with the reopening of our parishes, but also with something that had occurred locally. You see, in this area, we are in a farming area community. Part of our ministry is our outreach to our migrant farm workers. Here in this area, many of them are Mexicans and some from the Caribbean. As you may be aware, every year, Canada welcomes tens of thousands seasonal migrant workers from Mexico, Guatemala, the Caribbean, and other places to come and work in our fields and to help our farming industry. We know that they are vitally important to the life of our economy and to our food security. Because of the pandemic, we were unable to do our regular monthly gatherings. That is, we would normally get together, have a mass, have a social, talk with the men, or mostly men, and give them something to take home. That wasn't possible, of course, because of the threat of the spread. And we normally do this here at Blessed Sacrament in Burford and at the United Church in Linden, just outside of Brantford. So our outreach was rather limited. Basically, we used the platform, we live streamed the Mass, gave some messages and reflections. And then something happened. There was the outbreak of the virus at the Scotland farm just outside of Simcoe, Ontario, in Victoria. Over 200 workers were exposed to the virus. And mind you, it wasn't because they brought the virus here. It was a community spread. And unfortunately, maybe some actions that could have prevented that spread. Because there was such an overwhelming number of men that were infected, about 180 of them were brought here in the Brantford area to be housed in a nearby hotel. And then I heard on the news some of the reaction of the politicians and some people wondering, why are they here? our numbers are so low. Are they endangering our lives? Which was totally ridiculous because the men were under strict quarantine. They couldn't leave not only the premises, but even the confines of their room. And everything was looked after by the medical officers. So I sensed this fear and suspicion and despair. And myself and a few of the parishioners thought, why don't we do something with a gesture of hope, a gesture of kindness? And so with that, we decided to prepare gift bags for each of the worker. And a simple request invited an outpouring of generosity from here and from other places. We gave them each gift items of toiletries, masks, and other needed items for their day-to-day living. And I thought, what a beautiful gesture. Eventually, we were able to bring those items to them when they were beginning to finish off their quarantine. And then in the midst of all this, a tragedy happened. One of the workers succumbed to the illness. Juan Lopez Chaparro, husband, father, grandfather. Unfortunately, he was one of the workers who did not survive. I can never forget that fateful evening, that Saturday, when the medical officer, Dr. Shankar Nesafari, called me and said, Father, Mr. Chaparro passed away. Can you come and give the news to the men? And I did. It took us over 3 hours that night because they're not all in one location. And I could sense, even though they were far away from me outside, and I was wearing a mask and a gown, and they were with their mask and so forth, I could still sense the fear as they asked a number of questions and concerns for themselves and their family. It was a terrible tragedy. What could we do? And then people were starting to, again, reach out to me. Father, what can we do? Can we help? Can we help the family? And so, not by my own design, I sort of became the fundraiser for the Lopez Chaparro family. And by the way, we raised over $20,000 to assist the family. It could never replace the loss of their husband and father. But it was a small gesture to say, we grieve with you, we want to support you and help you in your hour of need. And I was able to maintain contact with the family, and I know that they were deeply, deeply overwhelmed with gratitude for the outpouring of love and kindness. We decided that we would not give in to despair. This is a horrible disease. But through these challenges, we saw a way to bring some light and allow God's providential love and grace to guide our hearts, our minds, and our actions. My hope and prayer for you, dear people, dear teachers, educators, staff of St. John's College, is that you will look forward to this year, maybe with some fear, maybe with some trepidation, but never giving in to despair. God will be with us. He will see us through this pandemic, and we can learn from this experience that we are not, all powerful, that we need God, that health is a gift, and that we need to support one another. My prayers and my blessings go to each one of you. God bless.